Okay, so good morning, good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on global developments in eco-modulated product recycling fees. I hope you're all keeping safe and well wherever you may be working from at the moment. Like many of you, I'm sure, I'm still working from my home, which comes with all sorts of interesting noises and distractions. Now, my dog has promised me that it won't bark during this webinar, but I guess we're going to find out in the next 60 minutes if he's being truthful or not. So, before we start, just a few ground rules, just to let you know that time permitting, there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation by typing those into the toolbox. Please remember though, we have many people on this webinar today, so we will try and answer as many questions as we can as the time allows at the end of the presentation. For any unanswered questions, we will of course follow up with those and provide our answers to the participants at a suitable time after the webinar today. Also, to let you know, we will be posting a recording of this webinar on the Sphera EC4P website, ec4p.com, in the coming days. If you would like a PDF copy of the slides as well, please let me know, or James Pearson, who's also in attendance today, please let us know and we'll be able to email those out to you as an attachment. Okay, great. So some quick introductions first. My name's Howard Stimpson, and I'm an operations director at the Sphera EC4P business unit. I've been providing expert consulting services to manufacturers on the EU and rest of the world, e-waste, batteries, packaging and RoHS compliance for the last 15 years. I actively present on a number of extended producer responsibility topics at many electronics conferences around the world. That's been somewhat curtailed this year, as I think it probably has been for a number of you in attendance today. But I have helped many hundreds of manufacturers over these 15 years to understand their producer responsibility, legal exposure, and help them then to implement legally robust compliance strategies for their product sales, not only in Europe, but also increasingly now in rest of the world countries. I'm pleased to be joined by my colleague James Pearson today, who's product director for EC4P for the last 7 years, who during today's webinar will be demonstrating Sphera EC4P's unique web reporting tool, Environmental Compliance, or EC4P as it's better known. Now, EC4P has been developed to allow manufacturer companies to be able to guarantee their WEEE batteries and packaging compliance obligations, not only in the EU, but also in other non-EU countries as well. So it's truly a global solution for your product sales. So what will we be covering over the course of the hour today? Well, firstly, we'll be looking at developments in the recently updated EU Waste Framework Directive and how this has implemented the EU Circular Economy Package to encourage recycling of products and packaging, and how this has in turn laid the foundations for the use of eco-modulated fees. We'll then take a look at some specific country case studies. We'll be looking at France, Italy, Netherlands, and Sweden in the EU to discover some of the recent developments to these countries' WEEE and packaging recycling compliance regulations in order to implement the eco-modulated product recycling fee concept. We'll also head over to Canada as well to see how packaging eco-modulated recycling fees are being included into Quebec's extended producer responsibility framework. I'll then spend a little bit of time just looking at how Sphera EC4P can help your company to manage your WEEE batteries and packaging compliance obligations globally, and to make sure that you are selecting the most cost-effective compliance arrangements for your product recycling. I'll then pass you over to my colleague James, who will demonstrate how Sphera's web reporting tool EC4P is being used by manufacturers to manage and report equipment, batteries and packaging sales to the correct format and to the correct regulatory deadlines all over the world. And of course, as mentioned, there should be opportunity at the end to answer questions which have been posted into the webinar toolbox. So a little bit of introduction about Sphera. As you may know, EC4P is now part of the Sphera company. Through software and consulting services, Sphera's experts work with organisations all over the world to help them surface, manage and mitigate risk in the areas of environment, health, safety and sustainability, operational risk management and product stewardship. Specifically, Sphera's product stewardship solution, of which EC4P is proudly part of, well, that really helps clients to create safer, more sustainable products and also help them to effectively manage chemicals throughout their life cycle. You can see that Sphera has a truly global reach with offices located all over the world. And specifically for Sphera's EC4P services, well, these are delivered from our office in the Southwest United Kingdom, where we provide our full range of managed global e-waste or WEEE batteries and packaging outsourced services, which really make sure that companies can meet their legal obligations for product collection, recycling, registration and reporting. As you can see on this timeline, our industry experience in the field of extended producer responsibility and specifically WEEE dates back all the way to 2003 when we wrote the UK government guidelines for WEEE and ROS. In 2005, we launched our pan-European web-based WEEE compliance services to assist manufacturers of professional use equipment to be able to manage WEEE collection and recycling arrangements through their corporate websites. In 2007, we were the first organisation in the UK to gain authorisation from the UK government to operate a licensed producer compliance scheme for WEEE, called B2B WEEE scheme. You may have heard of BOMcheck. In 2008, we launched the BOMcheck system. This is an industry-led web database which allows manufacturers and suppliers to share information on restricted and declarable substances in articles for REACH and ROS compliance. In 2009, we launched our managed services for integrated WEEE batteries and packaging compliance and extended this in 2013 to then cover rest of the world countries that had emerging EPR regulations coming into play. And then in 2014, as we'll be demonstrating the system today, we developed and launched our web tool EC4P to allow manufacturers to gather and manage their WEEE batteries and packaging compliance reporting data across the globe. Okay, so that's the introductions over with. Let's move to one of the main topics of discussion today. We'll start with looking at the requirements of the revised Waste Framework Directive. So the Waste Framework Directive has seen a number of revisions since actually its original conception back in 1975, which was implemented at the time to protect environment and human health by preventing or reducing really the impacts of waste. The updated Waste Framework Directive 2018/851 implements EU circular economy package measures, and that goes to regulate how products sold in the European Economic Area are reused, repurposed, recycled, or eventually disposed of. The directive also places minimum requirements for extended producer responsibility schemes to improve their governance and cost efficiency. And it actually requires member states to introduce EPR schemes for packaging by the 31st of December 2024 at the latest. So under these extended producer responsibility, these EPR measures, producers of products are really financially responsible for the management of the waste stage of the product life cycle. That includes separate collection, sorting, and treatment operations. Now, what we find in practice in many member states, producers join government-approved compliance schemes in order to meet their producer obligations for financing the collection and recycling of products for which they're responsible. The directive EPR measures also include producers' responsibilities to contribute to waste prevention and, importantly, to the reusability and recyclability of products. Now, under Article 8A(4)(b) of the Waste Framework Directive, member states must provide a form of modulation of financial contributions which are paid by the producer. Now, these are known as modulated recycling fees, and these are really an incentive for producers to design products that will contribute to the waste prevention as well as facilitate recycling at end of life. Typically, fees modulation takes a life cycle approach, and it really should be taken into account the product durability, repairability, reusability, recyclability, and also the presence of hazardous substances. Now, this very much takes a life cycle approach aligned with the requirements set by relevant EU law. And when it becomes available, it should be based on harmonised criteria in order to make sure there's a smooth functioning of the internal market in the European Economic Area. Now, in order to assure this harmonisation, Article 8.5 of the Waste Framework Directive requires the European Commission to publish guidelines in consultation with member states concerning extended producer responsibility schemes, as well as the modulation of these final contributions. Now, latest developments are that the guidance hasn't been published, and in fact, the results of the stakeholder consultation, which was carried out by Eunomia Research, were only published at the end of April this year. So we are a little way away from this harmonised guidance. Now, by way of example, if we look at packaging modulated fees, nearly all EU member states now have extended producer responsibility schemes in place for packaging waste. 9 countries have even more than one scheme in operation, whereas 12 member states only in fact have one scheme that you can join for packaging. Some schemes only cover certain types of packaging, so for example, household or packaging which is classed as equivalent household packaging. Some schemes are only open to commercial industrial packaging. Some schemes are only open to particular packaging material fractions. All EPR schemes really use at a basic level, and this isn't just for packaging, but it's also for WEEE and for batteries, a fee modulation approach. So this includes typically charging different recycling fees to producers for particular material types. So what we see in effect is that schemes charge significantly higher recycling fees for items that have lower market value and that are harder to recycle. So that can include plastic and composite packaging materials, and they're typically higher than fees for other easier to recycle items or items that would have a higher market value as a material substrate. So, for example, paper or card. Now, if we look at the concept of eco-modulated recycling fees, in a number of member states, we are now seeing a more detailed modulation of the recycling fees, which really include incentivizing producers to apply particular design aspects to their products or their packaging or their batteries, as well as including different fee levels within particular material types. So, for example, packaging which is reusable in countries where eco-modulated fees are being introduced, they may typically enjoy lower recycling fees compared to packaging of the same material, which includes additives, which makes it, of course, then harder to recycle. And in fact, the current eco-modulated fee structure, such structure in EU member states, generally follows one or more of the following strategies. Now, these may include the sub-differentiation of fees within a material category. So not just having a single fee payable for all equipment, batteries or packaging made from a certain material type, and instead further breaking down these fees categories according to the cost associated with managing that particular material at end of life. We also see a strategy whereby schemes will apply bonuses to the recycling fees for manufacturers who use particular materials, as well as penalties in the recycling fees for materials which are that much harder to sort and much harder to recycle. So I've said that we are seeing now member states introducing eco-modulated fees. And what I'd like to do now is spend some time looking at how eco-modulated fees are being applied in France, in Italy, Netherlands, as well as Sweden. So firstly, starting with France, how are we seeing the use of eco-modulated recycling fees taking place for WEEE as well as packaging? Well, France at present is in fact the only country in the EU which uses an advanced eco-modulation of recycling fees for electrical and electronic equipment. Quite surprising, but in fact we only have one country at this stage in the EU that applies eco-modulated fees to electronic products. Recent developments to the France Environment Code, which is essentially the legal framework for France environmental waste legislation, includes the use of eco-modulated fees for business-to-business equipment or professional use equipment, alongside the existing practice of using eco-modulated fees for consumer equipment, which has actually been in place, this practice, since 2010. Now, specifically for business-to-business products, we have three eco-design criteria, which, if they're met by the B2B product in question, allow for what's in effect a cumulative reduction in recycling fee applied to that particular product. Now, the criteria included are a commitment to be providing spare parts for the product for a minimum number of years, the absence of bromine in the plastic components, and at least 20% of any plastics being used coming from recycled content. What happens is if a product meets more than one of these criteria, actually meeting the second and third criteria only count as half. So in effect, the maximum obtainable reduction of the recycling fee, which will apply from July 2021, so this time next year, would be 40%. The WEEE compliance scheme, ESR, has introduced a three-tiered recycling fee approach to reward companies in a staged way for meeting these criteria. The three different eco-design fees range from a reduction in price from the standard fee from 10 to 20%. So we have 10% rewarded when one eco-design criteria is achieved, 15% rewarded when two eco-design criteria are achieved, and 20% rewarded, so a 20% discount when all three eco-design criteria have been achieved. So here we can see, just using chest freezers as an example, what the bonus reduction in recycling fee is with each eco-design criteria being applied to this product. Now, for packaging in France, compliance schemes must charge a lower recycling fee or a bonus for packaging that meet the following criteria. So polyethylene or polypropylene packaging, which incorporates at least 50% recycled material from household, industrial, or commercial packaging, well, up to the end of this year, that attracts a 50% reduction. And from the start of next year, a 50% reduction if at least 20% of the polyethylene or polypropylene household packaging is recycled. And then there's a 30% reduction if less than 20% of the PE and PP packaging is in fact recycled. So there is still a reduction there. And then we have polystyrene packaging, incorporating at least 50% recycled material from household packaging. That will also enjoy a 20% reduction in recycling fee from the 1st of January 2021. So under the French decree, bonuses for packaging have to be financed by contributions from packaging producers whose majority material in the packaging that they place on the French market is plastic. And it can't actually impact by law the contributions that are made by producers whose packaging consists of materials that are other than plastic. Okay, so we've had a look at France and how eco-modulated fees are being applied to WEEE and to packaging. If we now move east, we can take a look at how Italy is implementing eco-modulated fees for packaging compliance. So like in other EU member states, if you're a packaging producer in Italy, you must pay for the take back of used packaging and the collection of that waste. Local authority costs for that separate collection of packaging waste the reuse of used packaging, and the recycling, recovery and disposal of packaging waste. Now, at present, we have a single packaging compliance scheme in Italy known as CONAI, and really almost all packaging producers join CONAI and pay a contribution, which is a recycling fee, which is based on the quantity of packaging which they place on the Italian market. So a very similar approach that we have in other member states. Now, CONAI's recycling fees in Italy are subject to what's known as the composite rule. So the environmental contribution, the recycling fee, is paid at the rate for the predominant material. So, for example, a drinks carton, which it comprises 80% board, would be charged at the rate for board. So that's, that makes sense, really. Now, more recently, since January 2019, there's also been a further tier system, a 4-tier bonus structure introduced for plastic packaging. So we have these 4 tiers: Band A, which applies to industrial and commercial packaging that's currently collected separately and recycled, and that attracts a recycling fee of €150 per tonne. For Band B1 packaging from 2019, household packaging that's currently collected separately and recycled, which attracts a recycling fee of €208 per tonne. Then we move up the scale to Band B2 packaging, and that is packaging whose sorting and recycling chain is developed, and that attracts a recycling fee of €436 per tonne. And then finally, Band C, this is all packaging that's not currently sorted or recycled, and that attracts a recycling fee of €546 per tonne. So let's head to the Netherlands, and we can see how the Dutch have implemented the use of eco-modulated fees in their packaging system. So in the Netherlands, we have a threshold quantity whereby producers or importers that place 50 tonnes or more of packaging per year on the Dutch market have to register with Alverfonds Verpakkingen, excuse my Dutch, that's known as the Packaging Waste Fund. They also have to report quantities of packaging placed on the market and then pay the according packaging recycling fees based on how much packaging they're placing on the Dutch market. In January 2019, the Packaging Waste Fund launched the Packaging Fee Modulation Scheme, and that is due to remain in force until the end of 2022. Now, the Packaging Waste Fund can amend the scheme each year, but that can't be later than the 31st of December on the calendar year before the calendar year in which that amendment takes effect. The plastic fee modulation is really at the hub of eco-modulation, whereby it's intended to reward companies that use rigid plastic packaging that has good recyclability with a positive market value after sorting, leading to lower net costs for the Packaging Waste Fund. So for rigid packaging that has good recyclability, you can see here that we have a lower fee of 34€ per kilogram applied. The fees are re-established annually, and the relative discount compared to the regular plastic fee is kept in place on a multi-annual basis. Now, importantly, certainly from a corporate social responsibility perspective as well, any manufacturer that participates in the plastic fee modulation scheme is also listed on a public register. So anybody, including your customers, can go on to see that you contribute to the plastic fee modulation scheme. For being able to qualify, the packaging must meet 4 conditions to have good recyclability. So it has to be made from materials that can be collected or picked up by approved waste collectors, sorted or bundled into predefined streams for recycling processes. During that recycling process, the resultant material has to be processed on an industrial scale and reclaimed into raw materials, and the resultant packaging raw material has to have a clear composition and then obviously can be used to produce new packaging or in fact new products. So if you are a packaging producer in the Netherlands and you want to know and you want to confirm that your rigid plastic packaging qualifies as having good recyclability, the Netherlands Institute for Sustainable Packaging, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the Dutch name, the acronym is KIDV, provide a downloadable decision tree at the link here that allows you to confirm whether or not your packaging can be classed as having good recyclability. So it's a step decision process that you go through using their guidance. So finally, for the last country looking at today in the EU, let's head to Sweden and see how it's implementing its eco-modulated fees for plastic and paper packaging. Similar to other member states, companies placing packaging on the Swedish market have to register as a packaging producer. And in almost all instances, they join the packaging compliance scheme to meet their collection and recycling obligations. Now, the compliance scheme, packaging compliance scheme FTI, which covers all packaging materials except glass in Sweden, introduced a dual-level eco-modulated fee structure for plastic packaging and household paper packaging in 2019. The lower recycling fee for plastic covers plastic packaging designed according to FTI's guidelines, and it covers items made from polyethylene, rigid polypropylene, and polyethylene terephthalate. And it covers these items that don't contain fillers, if they're not black in color, they don't contain laminates, have a printed area less than 60%, and don't have a full covering of shrink wrap plastic. For all other plastic packaging, well, this attracts a higher recycling fee to reflect the fact that it's harder to recycle. For household paper packaging, the low recycling fee covers all paper packaging, as well as corrugated board, which comprises solely of paper. And then there is a higher recycling fee for household paper for other types of paper packaging, which again, by their composition, make it harder to recycle. So, for example, paper packaging, which includes any type of plastic, if it has a wax or aluminium barrier, if it has a plastic window, as well as paper that doesn't dissolve in water, or any other composite-based paper material. So, we considered a number of EU countries which have implemented these eco-modulated fees. What about other countries in the rest of the world if we head outside the EU? Well, firstly, I mean, let's consider if other countries outside the EU have implemented any form of extended producer responsibility regulations, not only for electrical and electronic equipment, but also batteries and packaging. Well, I mean, the short answer is yes. If I draw your attention to these maps, which show, and this is correct, as of 2019, and actually we're seeing even more countries, states, provinces, regions in 2020, where EPR regulations have been implemented in some capacity for WEEE, and then for batteries, and then for packaging. Now, the number of global regulations relating to product compliance, as I said, they really are increasing annually, with requirements and the regulations in each country really being sort of quite different between each one. The WEEE batteries and packaging regulations, they continue to change. So we've seen a number of amendments to the Indian WEEE regulations, really as new requirements are being implemented. In some instances, particularly in Asian regulations, there are also sub-ordinances that the producer has to understand and comply to. If we head over to Canada and look at the EPR regulations there, we see that packaging regulations are implemented at a provincial and territorial level. And the current state of play in Canada is that we have 5 provinces with EPR type regulations on packaging, and then New Brunswick have packaging regulations, but they are currently only in a draft form. Now, in those provinces where EPR regulations for packaging are in force, producers join producer responsibility organisations, or PROs, to meet their legal obligations for packaging collection and recycling. Now, the PRO, sort of known as compliance schemes, really in European circles, they operate in the Canadian provinces, the operating in Canadian provinces, they actually determine the costs relating to the recovery and the reclamation of each packaging material. And like in EU countries, we already see basic levels of recycling fee modulations based on the packaging material type. So paper being much less expensive to recycle than many types of plastic, for example. Now, if we look at Quebec, during the last 5 years, we've really sort of see the EPR packaging program having moved beyond just the simple modulated fee structure. So in Quebec, this province adopted a full EPR financing model for waste packaging back in 2011. And we now see that the PRO Eco Enterprise Quebec fees are actually modulated per material type. And they're arrived at by dividing the net municipal costs by the estimated volumes of materials generated according to each producer that reports to the scheme. Eco Enterprise Quebec then further sets the eco-modulated fees to really sort of incentivize design changes, which of course the aim being to reduce the environmental impacts of the packaging. And in the eco-modulated fee structure, it's really considering aspects such as the recycled content. So producers that use recycled content in their packaging may receive a bonus, and producers that don't may pay a penalty. They also look at greenhouse gas emissions, so packaging materials with lower life cycle or greenhouse gas impacts may incur lower fees. Again, makes sense from an eco-modulated perspective. Also looks at the reusability of the packaging, so reusable packaging may in fact even be exempt from paying packaging fees, and also the recyclability, so producers that use widely recyclable packaging may receive a bonus, and those producers that use difficult to recycle packaging, paper packaging, may pay a penalty. There is also this concept of lightweighting, whereby producers that actively reduce the amount of raw material used in their packaging may qualify for the bonus recycling fee as well. And we see that companies who are members of EQ are rewarded with a 20% credit for recycled content listed in this, demonstrated in this table here. So this 20% credit is applied in full for plastic and paperboard packaging materials, as you can see here. It does also apply to printed matter. So if you're selling and placing on the Quebec market newspapers, catalogues, magazines, for example, but the credit amount is on a sliding scale down to 50%. Okay, so we've had a look at developments of the eco-modulated fees in a handful of member state countries and also Canada. How do we then actively help companies to navigate, as you can see, what are differing EPR compliance requirements across the globe? Now, this includes not only in Europe, but other rest of the world countries as well. So how do we help really companies implement cost-effective and legally robust WEEE batteries and packaging compliance arrangements, at the same time making them aware that there are potential cost savings to be had through the use of eco-modulated recycling fees? Well, if your company has existing WEEE batteries or packaging compliance arrangements already in place, we can audit these arrangements to advise whether you're getting best value at lowest cost in each country. And this can include identifying those schemes where eco-modulated fees have been introduced. We can then assist you to make any compliance arrangements and upgrade these if we determine that you have gaps in your compliance, or if there are more cost-effective options for you. And if that involves joining you to your company to a compliance scheme, we can then manage that entire membership process for you. We can then transition any existing arrangements that you have where we don't need to make any upgrades over to EC4P for the ongoing management of those arrangements. If you've got no compliance arrangements in place at all, then our team of subject matter experts will assess your company's legal obligations and then provide legally robust compliance strategies to manage your EPR obligations, not only in all 28 member states and EFTA countries, but as we've seen in non-EU countries as well that now have EPR regulations in force. We can then provide a compliance assessment and help you to implement the compliance action plan in each country. So that includes joining you to most cost-effective and reliable WEEE batteries packaging compliance schemes, and then calculating your company's WEEE batteries packaging recycling obligation in each country as well. We can also confirm whether or not you would qualify for any eco-modulated fees that may be in place as part of the fee structure in that particular country. We then manage that whole process of maintaining the WEEE batteries and packaging compliance arrangements, including submitting registration reporting, sales data through our EC4P tool, which James will be shortly demonstrating, and if appropriate, we can pay the recycling fees on your behalf as well. We keep you up to date about any developments in WEEE batteries and packaging regulations, and you also have the option to use EC4P's administration service, whereby you can upload your entire enterprise resource planning output. It seems everyone's using SAP nowadays, but other ERP systems are available. And our team of subject matter experts will take this output, populate your EC4P dashboard with the reporting data, and then we take that data and report it onwards to the schemes and the regulators. We monitor recycling compliance schemes across the world. So we have over 330 recycling schemes, for example, in operation in Europe. And we make sure really that your company is getting the best value for the compliance arrangements. Help you really to choose the most suitable recycling scheme for your products and sales. I mean, for example, there are actually only a handful of compliance schemes in Europe currently that would provide a compliance service for all categories of WEEE batteries and packaging. And then we can really sort of help you achieve your lower recycling costs, not only by looking to see whether your products or your packaging qualifies for eco-modulated fees, but also looking at how you can make alternative compliance calculation methods to lower your recycling obligation. So just as an example, in 2016, we helped a manufacturer who we implemented new packaging compliance arrangements for in Italy to lower their recycling obligation from just over 49,000 euros to 19,000 euros for the previous 7 years of backdated packaging recycling fees, quite simply by changing how we were calculating the packaging obligation. There are also alternative WEEE batteries and packaging compliance options available to producers in many countries, and of course this represents an opportunity to make further cost savings. Again, by way of example, we recently identified alternative options for overseas manufacturers who direct sell to end users in France, who are therefore obligated under the French WEEE regulations to appoint an authorised representative to be able to save nearly 7,000 euros per year by actually joining a compliance scheme which offers an authorised representative service for free. Now, you've heard me mention EC4P a number of times today already, so what I'd like to do now is pass you over to my colleague James, who will give you a short demonstration of how EC4P is being used by manufacturers to gather and manage WEEE batteries and packaging sales data, really to be able to guarantee their compliance with the EPR reporting obligations, not only in Europe but across the world.